Welcome back. I'm back to do more of my how I edit videos. It's been a little while. Kind of a crazy summer, a lot going on, and I took a little break. But I'm back with another video of a photo that I took just recently in Glacier National Park, and I'm going to show you what I do to sort of finish the photo. So without further ado, let's dive in. So here we have this shot of this beautiful rocky face mountain here in Glacier National Park. We were fortunate to get to see this because so much of the park had been closed down due to COVID-19, but lo and behold, here it is. Now, at first glance, I really like this shot. I like what's there. I like the, I like all these highlights. That's really the feature to me, is the highlights. I think without these, little specks of sunlight, these glints of sunlight that are hitting this mountain at this angle, I think it would be a pretty flat and somewhat boring photo, although a beautiful place. And it's the thing that you'll notice a lot of times with landscapes is a lot of times you'll look with your naked eye and you'll see something, you'll say, that looks fantastic, that looks amazing, and then you take the photo and the photo is just kind of like so-so. And I don't think this one's so-so. I'm very happy with the overall image that I got, but I do want to tweak it. I do want to make it come to life a little bit more. And so the first thing I typically will do when I'm looking at a photo like this is like figure out, do I want to crop this? And I feel like I have a nice leading line over here that comes up from this corner, and that's cool. But one thing that bothers me about this photo just a little bit here is this cloud right here coming off from the right. Now, granted, this is nature. That's what was there. In a way, it's kind of like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what nature does. But for the sake of creating an image that I feel like is a finished image, as if I was painting this or something, I think I'm going to crop this. So I'm going to hit my R key. That brings up my crop tool, and I'm going to try to kind of keep the aspect ratio the same and just see what happens. So I'm going to come up like this, maybe kind of pull away from this cloud just to kind of get away from that a little bit. And I might come just a little bit more, maybe up to there. Now I'm losing a little bit of the information that is down here. I think I'll just come down just a touch, and that's not so bad. That's not a bad crop at this point. I think I can kind of leave it where it is at this point. I'll hit R, get out of the crop tool, and that way I'm really focusing on this mountain and in these little peaks of sunlight. To me, that is the focal point of the photo. And a lot of times you got to figure out, what is my focal point? Like, what is the main thing that I'm really trying to show? If there is a wow factor or something that has impact in my photo, what is it? And so for me, these glints of light just are that. And so I'm not even so concerned about the fact that the clouds are kind of, washed out here, and there's not a whole lot of detail going on there. That's okay. Because we're going to bring out more detail and we're going to bring out more color. This is a very flat image. It's raw, straight out of the camera. So, you can see over here in my adjustment panel, there's nothing. I haven't adjusted anything. I haven't adjusted any color. The sharpness is down at 40. I typically will just go ahead and sharpen this thing up to around 80 or something. You don't really see a huge difference just looking on your screen, but if you go to print it, you will see a difference, and it's nice to have a pretty sharp photo. One thing we can do, I'll go up here to, let's see, 4:1, and we're going to zoom way in. Well, that's way in, and see how sharp. Now, you can see at this point we're seeing pixels because if you look up here in this little box, this is a very small portion of an already cropped photo. So it's probably a little too close to look in and get an idea, but I'm going to back that up to, let's say, 2:1. And that's a little bit better. Now we can kind of see what our sharpness is doing. I'll pull it all the way back again to 0. Look how just fuzzy it is. Then you pull it up, If you go all the way, it gets crunchy and gritty, and there's like too many little details, I think. So just because sharpening is great, and just because we want sharp photos, that does not mean that cranking sharpening all the way up is your best friend. You want to find that kind of middle ground, that sweet spot. And sometimes it's a little more than the middle for me. I like to get closer to about 80. It just depends. You have to kind of be the judge of that. So we'll go back to the full view there. Again, you're not going to see that difference in a huge way just on your monitor, but it is important to know that you've got your photo as sharp as it can be. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm just going to go up here to these sliders. You know, this is kind of the main heart of Lightroom, just getting your tonality correct, getting everything the way you want it, just getting the highlights in control, getting the shadows in control, and getting your color, your white balance in control. White balance really isn't bad. Let's see. I want to see what camera I shot this with. I think I know. Okay, yes, the Z7, the Nikon Z7. I think I had just gotten this camera at this point, and I wanted to have the resolution to do a nice big landscape shot. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring up my exposure a little bit here. Just kind of brighten it up, and as you can see, it's getting washed out. It doesn't look better when I initially just bring my exposure up, but we're gonna get it to a good place. I'll go to plus 80, and my contrast, I'll just bump it a little. You don't see a massive difference when I do that, but I always like to add a little bit more contrast. Now, one thing I can do is pull down my highlights. I feel like my highlights are a little bit out of control. And a lot of times to get more contrast, I will pull highlights back, and a lot of times I'll dial in my contrast using these 4 sliders, the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, more than I'll use the contrast tool, because sometimes the contrast slider, it does this across the board contrast adjustment, which sometimes looks great, sometimes it doesn't. You just have to decide based on the photo you're working on. So I'm going to pull this way back. I'll pull my highlights way back, and you can see as I do that, the sky gets a little darker, and that's the main thing you're going to see the difference in is the sky. I mean, you can see that it's like turning lights on and off. Let's see my shadows. I actually want to bring my shadows up quite a bit. We're going to go to about there. Now, you're looking at this photo probably thinking like, what on earth are you doing, man? Like it's just a big washed out mess. It looks like you overexposed it, but fear not. We're going to be on the right track here in just a second. So let's pull down the blacks a little bit to minus 14, let's say. And now is where things are going to get interesting, because a lot of times in this situation, you know, and just in full disclosure, I have already edited this photo once before, but I wanted to kind of show you where I ended up with my sliders, where I ended up with all of my adjustments. And if I stopped right here, or if you quit watching the video now, you're going to think I'm terrible at Lightroom, that's just I suck at editing because this does not look good. And I don't know the exact order in which I adjusted things when I was initially editing, but all that being said, I'm going to bring up my dehaze actually quite a bit, and this is where things will start to really come in. You can see that it just starts to look great. Dehaze. We're going to go all the way to plus maybe 68. Now I'm going to hit Shift Command R, and that's going to bring us back to the original raw photo just straight out of camera. And then we'll hit Command Z and go back, and you can see, my goodness, look at the difference there. That's pretty incredible. It's quite a difference. And it's amazing how much dehaze helped me in this situation. There are times when dehaze will really destroy a photo, but for whatever reason, it seemed to be kind of the magic tool for this photo. So my dehaze is good. I'm actually going to pull my texture back a little bit, or just play around with it a little bit. It's very tempting to want to like keep adding more grit, more texture, and it just starts to look a little funky to me when I do that. So I'm actually going to pull back on the texture a little bit and try to give a little bit of it's almost like bringing the haze back, bringing some of the smoothness back. And that's just a personal preference thing. I just felt like that would look nice. We're going to look at 2:1 again and kind of zoom in. And yeah, you can see a lot more of the detail came out when I dehazed, but I wanted to kind of soften some of that grit back a little bit. Now, there are a couple of color adjustments I think I want to make too. I love the color of the light, and but one thing I struggle with a lot in my photos is I feel like a lot of times our photos don't do justice to the color green. Even though that might be the color that we saw, for whatever reason, a lot of times it just doesn't blend in very well with the photo, in my opinion. That's how I tend to see things sometimes. So let's pull back. A lot of times, if you want to change the color of green, you really have to adjust your yellow slider here, the hue. You want to be in your HSL panel, and this is how I run my HSL panel. There are different ways to view it, but I like to see my hue up here, my saturation, and my luminance. I'm going to pull back yellow though, and let's see what happens if we make our yellows a little more orange. See what it's doing to the ridge up here when I do that? It's kind of making that sunlight look a little more golden, and which I think looks really, really fantastic. I don't want to go too far with it. Maybe go about right there. And so I'm going to now pull back my green a little bit. In this case, pulling back yellow didn't really do a whole lot to the green here. And the green doesn't really bother me so much, but there are times when the green will be a little bit obnoxious in some photos, especially if you're doing portraits or something and you've got green leaves in the background. It's amazing how much they can really mess with the color tonality, and you get this thing called like a green cast over your photos, and it's just a lot of times it's very ugly. In this case, it's not so bad, but I will pull my greens back a little bit, meaning I'm just going to change the tonality of green, and you can see over here as I do that, you can see how much things change. I mean, if I go way over, it's not a very flattering green. It doesn't even look green at this point. So we're gonna kind of go just a little more subtle with the green slider. I'm gonna go to like minus, maybe right there. Just kind of watch the photo as you're sliding, as you're moving your slider. Watch your photo and see, in real time what you're getting from it. And then so I have this kind of orange light coming across here, which is nice, but I want to like see what happens if I adjust that color of orange a little bit. Maybe go back to, you can see the ridge of the mountain. See how it's changing that? I actually kind of like that. It just seems like it's more flattering to the color spectrum across the photo, and a lot of times that'll affect your reds, so you can play with the reds too and just see what that does. Doesn't seem to do a whole lot. I'll just leave it about there. But that's really it on the color. I think that's pretty much where I want to go. Again, I'm going to hit Shift Command R. We're going to reset, and you'll see the before, and then hit Command Z and after. Okay, great. Now, you might be asking why I'm not using the backslash key. A lot of times you can just hit the backslash key to look at your before and after, but I've made a virtual copy of my original edit and then reset it there. And whenever I do that, it doesn't take me back to the raw, straight out of camera look. So this is a bit of a workaround for that. The next thing I want to do as I look at this photo, I love this foreground. I actually really wanted to get the foreground. I love these lines coming down the grass through, on the side of this mountain here. I love all of that. And so one thing I want to do is really bring that out a little bit more. So I'm going to bring up an adjustment brush by hitting the K key, and that brings up my options here for adjustment brushes. We've got all these different types of brushes that we can bring up. And what I'm going to do is bring up the exposure of this area. So we're going to increase the exposure. Maybe I'll go quite a bit. Sometimes I'll go pretty far just to kind of see where I'm actually affecting the photo. And then you can always go back and adjust how bright you get it. Well, let me just start by painting some brightness here. Now you can see as I'm doing this, it's pretty hazy and it's not very flattering. It doesn't look great. But it is bringing out more of the exposure there, but we're losing a lot of the contrast in it. And but what's nice here, and if you're in the middle of this tool or the middle of an adjustment, you can hit the O key, and it'll bring up a mask, kind of showing you everywhere that you've painted. So that can help you kind of refine where you're painting. All right, now I'm gonna hit the O key again, bring it down. Again, this is very hazy. It doesn't look great. But that's okay. We're gonna keep working on it and try to get it to a better place. So one thing I'm gonna do is adjust the color tonality of this. So I'm gonna kind of warm up the temperature a little bit, and yeah, see when I warm that up how it just starts to really come alive. I really love the way that looks when I do that, and just doing that alone kind of helped with some of that contrast issue. I think getting your colors right in your photo is so crucial if you really want to polish that photo up, especially with landscapes and things like this. Well, really any photo, but in a landscape, even though what you might have seen with your naked eye, it might not have had so much vibrance in every element of the photo. That's okay. That's how we see things in nature. But when you're displaying that to somebody as, you know, a photograph, and you're trying to show them what you've seen, you really want to make sure you accentuate all the things you saw without going too far, without it looking gimmicky. It's all about balance here, and it takes time to learn the balance. I like this color. I just want to play around with the tint. I don't know if adding less tint, or I don't know if bringing the tint more towards green helps. It's not bad. I actually want to go a little bit more towards my magenta and just see what happens there. Okay, I don't know about you, but I like where that is right there. I think that looks really pretty great. And I'm happy with the color there. Really, there's not a whole lot more I want to do to this photo. I might actually do a freeform crop at this point, lose a little bit more of the sky. We've got this kind of highlight up here on this cloud, which if I saw more of this up in here, I think it would be really beautiful, but it wasn't there. And here's the thing to remember is that in a photo like this, the sky is not the most interesting. I will admit that, but there's so much great stuff going on right in here that I'm not really so worried about the sky. The sky's not terrible. It's just kind of neither here nor there, but I'm really trying to show this mountain and this green rise up to the rocky face. So what I'll do is hit my R key, bring up my freeform crop. We're going to click this padlock over here so we can actually freeform it. And you know, sometimes it's a little bit dangerous when you do that, because then when you go to print, there are some odd sizes. But I believe in creating the rectangle that works the best for your photo. That's what is going to matter more than anything. And you know, you don't always want to constrain yourself to one type of crop, because then you end up with all this extra information in the photo that you didn't need, or it just isn't quite right. And so a lot of times cropping is where I try to get it right. And so I'm going to bring that down a little bit. In fact, I'm going to go just below this bright little cloud here. And this makes it a wider crop. Yeah, it's an odd shaped crop, and you're going to have to figure that out when you go to print. But at this point, I like where it is. That looks really great to me. One thing I'll do at this point is I'm going to hit the L key 2 times, and it's going to bring out the lights out mode and kind of show me just a presentation of the photo. I think that looks really nice. I'm very happy with it. As I look at the photo in further detail, there are a couple of things I'd like to address. You know, we've got this little patch of snow here, and then we've got a couple other little patches of snow here, and there's really nothing wrong with them, but in a way, I just don't want to see them. There's not enough of them to really be part of the story of the image to me. So I'm going to hit L again, get back into my main develop panel, and I'm going to hit Q, which is going to bring up my clone and healing brush tools. Let's start by trying healing. I'll keep opacity at 100%. Feather somewhere around there. You know, we can adjust the size of the brush. I use a mouse when I edit and a trackpad. In this case, I'm using the mouse to increase and decrease the size of my brush just by dragging my finger. You might have a scroll wheel. I use an Apple Magic Mouse, so it's just kind of a touch sensitive mouse. And I'll get that brush size just a little bit larger than the patch of snow. We'll just paint right over it, see where it draws from. Okay, it drew from right there. Hit your H key, and that'll hide that adjustment. And to me, I mean, that just, you can't even tell. That looks fine. That's totally acceptable to me. There are times when you're going to really have to fine tune it and work on it, but to me, that just got rid of it perfectly. I'll hit the H key again, hit the Q key, get out of there, and then I'll get over here and take out a couple of other little spots that I just feel like are unnecessary. I'm going to shrink that brush size down, click there, hit H. Looks acceptable to me. No one's going to see that and say anything, but I do get perfectionist about things sometimes, and I will I'll click on the spot that I actually want to adjust, and then drag the selection area around and just kind of see what looks the most natural, and to me that works just fine. Again, that's really nitpicky, but you know, sometimes all those little adjustments add up to either make your photo better or worse. And so let's go over here. We'll get rid of this one. I didn't even see where that was drawing from because I had my H key, the tool was still hidden. It drew it from there. Let's drag around and see if we have a slightly better looking spot where we can pull from. There we go. Great. That looks great. Now I'm going to get out of my healing brush tool. I'm going to zoom in. Oh, zoomed in a little too much there. Got this little one here. While we're getting rid of the others, we might as well just get rid of this. Shrink that brush way down. Paint over it. H. Looks fine. I'm going to zoom back out. We're going to kind of drag around here. And then I've got just a couple more little spots over here that I'd like to address. So we'll zoom in, scroll over, and we're going to see about getting rid of these little spots, which these will be easy. All right, get that one out of there. We get this one out of there. And let's paint over this. And let's hit H and see what happens. It looks fine. When you're dealing with all these irregular surfaces like rocks and trees and stuff, there's a lot of room to sort of fudge it a little bit and not get things absolutely perfect. If you're dealing with somebody's face, it's a different story. But in this case, I think that's pretty well finished for me. I really like this image. I will hit the L key twice. Again, bring up my lights out view and kind of just see it as a finished product. And, there's always more you can do to a photo, but I feel like I'm pretty happy with that, and I'm going to leave it there. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you. I really liked that photo. It was one that I easily could have just looked at and thought, well, there's nothing here. But just by working on it a little bit, you can see how we took it from good to great. And I don't even take a whole lot of the credit for that because the place is magnificent. So a lot of times you're going to be in front of amazing places, beautiful faces, all kinds of things that are just so photo worthy. You'll take the photo and you won't be that excited about it. But just know that just with a little bit of editing and kind of reworking it, there's so much you can usually pull out of a photo. And so if you see something gorgeous and something that's worthy of taking the photo, by all means, take the photo. Just try to get it sharp and try to get it composed well. And, you have so much leverage when you get into editing. So that's what this is all about. And I'll be back with more videos soon. Thank you guys for all your support. Please go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I appreciate it, and I'll be back.